So I'd like to welcome Mr. Danny Hakim. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've had the pleasure of talking to him quite a bit over the last, I guess it's just been about 2 weeks. I feel like I've known him for quite a while, though. He himself is a two-time world karate silver medalist and holds a 7th degree black belt from Japan. He's the founder of Budo for Peace and chairman of Sport for Social Change in Israel Life-Saving Federation, which is actually, everybody should look that up because it's a really interesting organization. I did not know about it before. He's a board member of the Azrieli Foundation and the Alliance of Middle East Policy. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Hakim, today. So first, welcome, thank you. And as we discussed, we'd love if you'd share with us a little bit about your background and why you were invited today besides for being an amazing person.
Well, I'm invited here because my father is from Cairo. My mother's from Alexandria. I'm actually born in Australia. I'm actually born in Adelaide, which is a small city in the south, because the boats that came from Egypt in 1956 stopped in Adelaide. So most of the Jewish community in Adelaide were Egyptian Jews. But I grew up in Sydney. And 20 years ago, I made Aliyah. I'm here because of my parents and my grandparents. Both grandfathers are buried in Egypt, one in Cairo and one in Alexandria. And I can say last year when they opened the synagogue in Alexandria, we actually found the grave of my grandfather, which is quite incredible. So that's why I'm here.
Can you tell us a little bit about that experience, about going to the opening of the synagogue?
Well, I didn't actually go. My brother went. But we had a film crew as well that came, and it was a real surprise to have this discovery. And we knew that my grandfather was buried next to a 4-year-old. So to find a 4-year-old grave amongst a very large graveyard wasn't that difficult. And that's how they found it. So
let's go a little bit differently. You shared with me when we were talking before an interesting kind of take on why you decided to reclaim your heritage and speak out about it. So can you tell us that?
So when I grew up in Australia, my grandmother was cooking Egyptian food, and about a few years ago. Now, I'm really crazy about molokhaya soup, what we grew up in Australia, and all my cousins and relatives love molokhaya soup. And a few years ago, I visited my Bedouin friends and I brought some molokhaya soup. And my daughters asked, "What is this goop?" And I said, "It's molokhaya soup. Don't you know what that is? It's in our blood. It's Egyptian." And that's when I realized, hey, my kids, I have 15 and 16-year-old girls. They didn't know about molokhaya. They didn't know about sambusek. They didn't know all the tradition and the food heritage that I grew up on. So when they started doing their Roots project, that became a very important part, understanding their Egyptian heritage.
And that's a very Israeli thing. So do you want to explain a little bit what that Roots project is?
When they're, I think, 13 years old, they have to decide on one of their family, it's usually the father or the mother, and their background, and they write a project about the genealogical tree and about their heritage. And they dive deeper into just, my parents are from Australia and from Egypt. So it's a very important project because it's really the start for them to understand their own identity and not just being Israeli. So,
right. It puts us in the context of our heritage, and that's, it would be nice to expand upon that in the school system as well. But I think that's an important point, that there is this project and hopefully people share it. And at least it allows our children in Israel to go into their own family's heritage. So if you were to say something right now to our audience about why it's important to reclaim your heritage and why it's important to to be part of this discussion. Can you tell us?
Well, reclaiming your heritage is very connected to your identity. And if you want, I want my children to feel strong and empowered and confident. And I think part of it comes from the parents, but also it's part of the DNA and understanding your heritage, where my parents came from, where my grandparents came from, what interested them. I think that's what really is important for my kids. And it's different. When I grew up in Australia, I was a Jew in an Ashkenazi community. And actually, when I represented Australia in many world championships, I was the minority of being Jewish, but the minority of being a Sephardi. I was proud of both those identities, but it was a very important part of my identity. And I really believe that that's very important for kids to understand where they're from and to appreciate their own heritage. And that's why reclaiming identity is very important.
Thank you so much. And thank you also. I'm going to put a little plug for our podcast series that you already recorded for. So thank you. We will hear more from Mr. Hakim in January. So please do tune in. And thank you again for joining us. And thank you for everything you do across physical and mental health. So thank you.